sound of jangling keys and smug laughter echoed down the quiet street as four white men slowly circled a lone black woman beside her car in a silent suburban cul-de-sac. "She'll panic like the rest," one of them muttered under his breath. What they didn't see, what they didn't even think to notice, was Amina Lewis crossing the street with two German shepherds flanking her like shadows. Her fingers tapped twice against her thigh. "Keep it moving," one of the men said with a smirk. Amina didn't reply. She didn't need to. What none of them knew was that the woman they just tried to dismiss had once trained elite military dogs in combat zones. A retired Marine canine handler. She didn't bluff. She didn't rattle. She calculated. Before we go on, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something you'll never forget. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over pristine lawns and cookie-cutter homes. It was the kind of neighborhood where silence wasn't just expected, it was part of the brand. Identical mailboxes, spotless driveways, glowing porch lights flicked on too early, as if the whole block had agreed the day should end before it even tried. Amina didn't walk like someone out for a stroll. She moved like someone who had never trusted quiet moments that came too easy. Her steps were steady, deliberate. Her navy shirt peeked beneath a half-zipped hoodie. Tactical pants hugged her stride. At her sides moved Echo and Valor, silent, focused, alert. They didn't bark, didn't pull. They didn't need commands. They knew the drill. 3 months into living here, and Amina had walked this route almost daily. The streets always looked the same, but the eyes behind the curtains didn't. Sometimes a silhouette shifted behind the blinds. Sometimes a phone lifted just slightly at a window. No one waved. No one asked about the dogs. No one asked about her. And that was fine. Amina hadn't come here to make friends. She came here for one thing, peace. She'd earned it. But today, that peace felt different. The kind of different that settles deep under the skin. Echo noticed first, ears tilting forward. Valor's jaw tightened. Their pace slowed, heads raised, sniffing the air. Something was off. Then Amina heard it. Male voices, loud enough to carry, but calm enough to avoid suspicion. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't harmless either. It was the sound of confidence. Confidence that didn't expect to be challenged. She paused at the corner where the sidewalk curled past a tilted mailbox and a trimmed hedge. Her weight shifted to the balls of her feet. The dogs froze with her. She didn't need to see them to know what she was walking into. She'd heard that tone before. Men who didn't threaten with volume, but with presence. The kind of men who knew no one was going to stop them. She gave a quiet command. Just a whisper. Echo glided left through the bushes like fog. Valor veered right. They vanished from sight, but they never left her range. They knew the ground. They had the perimeter. And Amina walked forward. Around the hedge, she saw them. 4 men, mid-30s to early 40s, standing in a semicircle just close enough to trap, but not close enough to touch. They wore work boots and cocky grins, their body language full of false ease. The woman they cornered was sharply dressed, blazer, slacks, heels, probably a property appraiser, but her back was stiff, her grip tight on her bag. When her eyes flicked toward Amina, it was for a split second, but it said everything. One of the men leaned in, voice oily. "Just asking a few questions. No need to get jumpy. A woman like you walking here alone, people notice." Another crossed his arms, chuckling. "Looks like she's either lost or scouting the place. Pick one." A third snorted. "Bet she doesn't even live here. Probably just visiting from the next county, playing pretend." The last one took a slow, calculated step forward. His hand hovered near her blazer, not touching. Just enough to send a message. Or maybe she just wants someone to notice her. Amina didn't shout. She didn't warn. She just moved forward, slow and direct, letting the moment hang long enough for them to feel it. And then they turned. At first, the men looked past her, expecting maybe another curious neighbor, someone who'd nod awkwardly and keep walking. But their expressions shifted the moment they sensed something different. Amina's stance wasn't fearful. It was composed, centered, ready. And then they noticed the dogs. 2 large German shepherds, silent and still, had moved into position behind them, low to the ground, eyes sharp, teeth just barely visible. Not barking, just watching. Amina's voice cut through the air like glass, calm, controlled. You're going to take 3 steps back, each of you. The man closest to the woman cocked his head. Excuse me? You heard me, she said, still steady, still. One of the others scoffed, trying to brush it off. This your thing now? Some kind of club? Yeah, another chimed in. Women with dogs and an attitude. Real brave, huh? A third muttered, low and bitter. Acting like that makes you tough? Amina didn't flinch. Instead, she took a single step forward. Echo, to her left, crept into view, teeth flashing just long enough to send a message. Valor mirrored from the right, his body coiled like a spring. Still leashed, still waiting. Amina didn't shout. Last warning, step away from her. But the tallest man didn't move back. Instead, he pulled a small folding knife from his pocket. He didn't open it, just held it, as if that alone would be enough. Lady, maybe you don't get how things work around here. Amina's eyes locked onto the knife, then flicked up to meet his. She wasn't looking at the threat. She was calculating options. Distance, angle, timing. She knew exactly what to do. She'd trained for moments like this for years. Her hand shifted near Valor's collar. The dogs remained frozen, muscles tight, every instinct coiled but waiting. The air was razor sharp now, on edge. Across from her, the woman hadn't moved, but her breathing had changed. She was bracing. The knife-wielding man wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes darted between Amina's hands, the dogs, and the small, shrinking space between all of them. Then Amina's voice dropped, barely louder than a whisper, but unmistakably final. If you want to find out what I'm trained for, keep going. Silence. One of the others, red-faced and jittery, forced a nervous laugh. All right, calm down. You're not scaring anyone. He gave the man with the knife a subtle nod, and that's all it took. The man lunged, fast, low. A sharp glint of steel angled toward Amina's left. Echo! The word cracked like lightning. The shepherd launched forward, silent, focused, brutal. He hit the attacker mid-charge, knocking him sideways. Jaws locked around the man's forearm with the force of a bear trap. The knife spun free, clattering on the sidewalk and disappearing into the grass. The man screamed, not loud but deep, as if the pain had bypassed pride entirely. He staggered, trying to fight free, but Echo held on. Back legs braced, twisting the arm until the man collapsed to one knee. Amina was already moving. Her boot connected with the man's shoulder, dropping him flat. She didn't stop. Another one came at her from the right, shirt clinging with sweat, fists clenched, coming in wide and reckless. A heavy swing aimed at her head. He never landed it. Amina slipped under the punch, pivoted, and drove her elbow into his ribs with a thud that stole his breath. He stumbled. She grabbed his wrist, twisted, dropped him to the ground in a heap. He tried to roll. She let him, then struck again, sharp knee into his side. He gasped. She leaned in, forearm pressing into his throat. No threats, no taunts. I warned you. She stood smoothly, unshaken, not even breathing hard. Echo still had the first man pinned, blood now visible around the arm, the knife long gone. The man muttered, pleading now, I'm done, please. Only then did Amina give the command. Let him. Echo released and stepped back in one fluid motion, still bristling, still watching. At Amina's side again. The other two men hadn't moved, one with his mouth open, the other gripping a baton he hadn't dared raise. Their confidence had cracked, but not yet broken, not fully. They were still doing the math, still calculating whether they thought this woman and her dogs were a gamble, a risk worth taking. But now, the answer wasn't so clear. Their silence said what their smirks no longer could. Tasha was still against the wall, wide-eyed, phone clutched to her chest like a lifeline she hadn't figured out how to use. She hadn't screamed, she hadn't run, but her breath was fast and tight. Amina didn't turn to her. She didn't need to. She could feel the woman's fear and her quiet gratitude, like a heartbeat pulsing near her own. The two remaining men weren't laughing anymore. Their friends were already on the pavement, one bleeding, one gasping. But what replaced their confidence wasn't fear, not yet. It was something colder, like pride daring them to recover what they believed they'd lost. Amina moved first. She angled toward the parked cars, shifting the fight to a tighter space, a natural bottleneck. Only one person could come through at a time now. Echo disappeared wide behind a pickup, circling with precision. Valor stayed close, eyes locked on the baton still clenched in the taller man's fist. He charged first. Weapon raised, he swung high, but Amina was already under it. One blow to the ribs, a second to the chin, a sharp strike to the leg that sent him staggering into a nearby car. Before he could recover, she grabbed his shirt and slammed his head against the hood. The baton slipped from his hand. So did everything else. But the fourth man was already in motion. Younger, faster, more desperate. He came with his hands raised, not like a trained fighter, but like someone who'd relied on size and speed to win every brawl. He landed a punch, but Amina didn't even flinch. She stepped into the next one, blocked it, and twisted his arm at the elbow, dropping his stance. Then came a precise, slicing kick across his core. He bent, wheezing, reeling, and reached behind his back. That's when the second knife appeared. Valor! The command was steady, quiet, immediate. Valor struck like shadow, latching onto the man's arm before the blade could even rise. The man folded under the force, crumpling sideways. Amina closed in, a knee to the chest, an elbow to the temple. The man dropped, sliding down the side of a minivan. The knife clattered against the curb. Still, the dogs returned to her side in perfect formation. Echo to the left, Valor to the right. Low growls hummed in the air. Not loud, just enough to remind anyone still standing what had just happened. Amina scanned, calm, controlled, breathing through her nose, watching for what might come next. Behind her, one of the downed men groaned and tried to crawl. Another coughed blood onto the sidewalk. The baton was under a truck tire. The knife gleamed in the gutter, untouched. Tasha had stepped forward without even realizing it. Her lips moved, but no words came. Her eyes flicked to the man on the pavement, then back to Amina. "I can call someone," she said, voice dry, unsure. "You just did," Amina answered, eyes still forward. "They'll be here." She finally looked at the bodies scattered across the quiet suburban street. Porch lights still blinked overhead, silent witnesses in a neighborhood that hadn't seen a day like this. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower droned on, indifferent to what had just taken place. Tasha took another step forward. "They'll lie. You know that, right? They'll say you started it. They always do." One of the men tried to lift himself again, swearing under his breath. Tasha didn't flinch this time. Amina looked down at him, then to her dogs. "Stay." They froze. She knelt beside the man and pulled out a zip tie from her back pocket. Smooth, precise, professional. She bound his wrists without saying a word, then moved to the next, then the next. Tasha followed, still silent, collecting weapons. dropping them into a trash bin without needing to be told. And then came the sound. Sirens. No longer distant, no longer someone else's emergency. Lights flashed down the street, casting a red-blue haze across lawns and driveways, washing over the stucco walls of homes that had never expected this moment. But the moment had come, and Amina was ready for it. The moment stretched thin, held breathless in the afternoon haze, until tires screeched against the curb and patrol car doors flung open before the engines had even settled. 3 police cruisers skidded to a halt across the road, forming a rough barricade that arrived too late to stop what had already unfolded. Amina didn't speak. She didn't need to. With 2 short signals and 1 calm command, heel. Her dogs returned to her side in perfect sync, muscles taut, senses sharp, but posture disciplined. Echo tucked in behind her left leg, Valor to her right. They were statues now, watching, ready. The officers poured out with fast eyes and rigid steps, scanning the scene with the practiced suspicion of people trained to assume chaos had a culprit. Tasha stepped forward from the shadows of the wall, now standing slightly behind and to the right of Amina. Her hand trembled around her phone, but her voice found its way through the noise. "You saved me," she whispered. "They were going to—" She stopped herself, swallowed hard, then added quicker, "Let me give you my number. If something goes wrong, I'll speak up. I'll tell them the truth." "They'll twist it," Amina said, her voice quiet but sure, still watching the officers approach. "But go ahead." Their phones moved fast, numbers exchanged without ceremony. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was urgent, heavy with the shared understanding that what came next wouldn't be fair, no matter how official it looked. The first officer on scene scanned the street, the injured, the dogs, the woman standing like she had nothing to hide. One man was holding a bloodied arm, another curled near the sidewalk, shirt stained, 2 more groaning. And still, the officer's attention snapped back to Amina, because the dogs didn't bark, didn't move, didn't challenge. They just watched. She came out of nowhere. The injured man suddenly cried out, his voice sharp and breathless as he lifted his arm like a flag. "Didn't even say anything. She just sent those dogs at us. We were just standing here." Another chimed in from behind a utility box, his voice cracked and sweaty. "She said we didn't belong. She went crazy. I didn't even touch that lady. She attacked us." Tasha couldn't stay quiet. She stepped forward, her voice slicing through the noise like a clean break. "That's not what happened," she said, her tone clear and grounded. "They cornered me. They were threatening me. One had a knife. She didn't start anything. She stopped it." One of the younger officers raised his hand to calm the growing voices. "Ma'am, we'll take your full statement shortly. Please, stay here." Tasha opened her mouth again, ready to protest, but stopped when she saw Amina's face, still calm, still unflinching. The silence between them now said everything neither could put into words. Then the back door of the 3rd cruiser opened. A tall man stepped out, wearing a crisp uniform and walking like he already believed he had the situation figured out. Deputy Clayton Mays. His steps were slow, deliberate, authoritative, every glance delivered like a final word, every movement calculated to signal control. He didn't scan the scene. He didn't ask questions. He looked directly at Amina. Well, he said, almost smiling. "Didn't think I'd see your name cross my desk again. Let's see how far that Marine training takes you in court." Amina didn't flinch, didn't respond, but the way her eyes locked on his told him she wasn't intimidated. "She was protecting me," Tasha said louder now. "They're lying. There's a knife in the grass. You can check. She never touched it." Mays barely looked at her. "We've already got multiple statements and injury reports," he said smoothly. "We'll take your version, of course. But based on what we're seeing here, this woman is being detained for questioning. Pending review of the injuries and use of trained animals, additional charges may follow." That's when Amina spoke, calm, clear, unmoved. "There's a camera," she said. "Corner house, facing the street." For the first time, Mays hesitated, just for a second. But the damage had already been done. The footage would show it all: the knife, the threats, the truth. Amina knew it, and so did Mays. But he only gave a small nod, one that almost masked the smirk pulling at the edge of his mouth. "If it exists," he said, smooth and dismissive, "it'll be reviewed during the investigation." He gestured toward one of the officers, who approached Amina slowly, cuffs in hand, face unreadable. "I'm not resisting," she said calmly, turning with silent precision and presenting her wrists without hesitation. The cuffs clicked into place, not painful, but tight, deliberate. Amina didn't flinch. She didn't speak. "You can't arrest her!" Tasha called out, stepping forward. Her voice cracked, but didn't break. "She didn't do anything wrong. You're making a mistake." "No, ma'am," Mays replied without looking back. "We're following procedure." As another officer neared the dogs, Echo let out a low, rolling growl, a deep vibration, not of anger, but of warning. Valor stayed fixed, still coiled with control, unmoving. "Stand down," Amina said, voice low. Both dogs responded instantly, rising and allowing themselves to be led to a second vehicle that had just arrived. As Amina was escorted toward the cruiser, Tasha stepped beside her again, hands trembling. "I'll call someone, a lawyer. I'll do whatever I can." Amina paused just before getting into the car. Her body was upright, unshaken, a wall in motion. She met Tasha's eyes, not with fear, but with clarity. "I know you will," she said softly. The door shut behind her. The cruiser rolled forward. Through the tinted window, the street began to fade. But Amina's focus didn't. She sat still, shoulders squared, eyes forward, not defeated, just calculating. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of another fight. One she would face the same way she always had. One step at a time, one fact at a time, one lie at a time. Inside the precinct, the hum of fluorescent lights pressed down like pressure in the chest. Everything was dull, the echo of phones, the soft churn of a copier, the shuffle of boots in a hallway that never hurried. Amina stood in processing, uncuffed but under watch. Officers worked in silence around her. Her phone, her wallet, and the harnesses that once belonged to Valor and Echo sat in a sealed evidence bag. Her fingerprints had already been taken. So had her photo, twice. No one asked questions that showed curiosity. No one asked why. She hadn't resisted. But her silence wasn't submission. It was discipline. The dogs had been separated the moment she arrived, loaded into an animal control van, treated like property instead of partners. She'd watched them through the narrow rear window of the cruiser. Echo had looked back once, just once. Eyes locked on hers until the corner took him away. Valor hadn't looked. His loyalty was forward-facing, always. Across the station, Officer Derek Ames sat at his desk, frowning at the report on his screen. Something didn't match. 4 men, all insisting they'd been attacked, one with a deep arm wound, another barely standing. All of them painting the same perfect picture, an unprovoked ambush by a dangerous woman with military dogs. But it didn't track. Ames had seen the scene himself, had seen the control, the timing, the restraint. He clicked on her name. Sergeant Amina R. Lewis, United States Marine. Commendations. K-9 unit. Combat deployments. Fallujah, Kandahar, Ghazni. Honorably discharged. 0 priors. 0 complaints. Her last recorded action? Defusing an IED while under direct fire with her dogs. He stared at the screen, not because he was confused, but because the woman in that file didn't match the one now sitting in holding. Or maybe she did. Exactly. Amina sat alone in a narrow cell built of gray cinder block and quiet disregard. The bench beneath her was cold. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, eyes open but focused somewhere far beyond the bars. She didn't see the hallway. She saw memory. Helicopters skimming too low at dusk. The sound of warnings shouted over radios. The weight of sand and smoke thick in the lungs. She saw Echo pushing through a field with a limp he refused to acknowledge. She saw Valor hold position after a blast, standing guard over her like a shield that never moved. And even here, even in silence, she was calculating. They took her freedom. They took her dogs, but they didn't take her mission. Not yet. She could still hear it, that high-pitched ringing in her ears from an old explosion, the smell of burned cloth, the way her hands kept working long after her thoughts stopped. It wasn't a memory. It was always there, just under the surface, not haunting, anchoring. She breathed in slowly, counted to 5, released, again and again, not to forget, but to stay focused, present. The moment cracked as the sound of boots echoed down the hallway. She looked up. Tasha stood beyond the bars, flanked by a desk officer holding a clipboard. Her blazer was rumpled now, earrings gone. Her expression somewhere between rage and relief. In her hand, a folded receipt and a manila envelope. "I posted your bail," she said without waiting. "You're coming out." Amina rose. No questions. The officer opened the door, stepped aside. The two women met just beyond the threshold. Tasha searched her face, trying to read the storm behind that steady exterior. Amina nodded once in thanks, but her shoulders were still braced, ready. "They said the guys submitted video," Tasha continued as they walked. "But it's edited. You're not even in half of it. They cropped everything. The dogs, the way they approached you. It makes it look like you attacked them out of nowhere." Amina didn't stop walking, not until they reached the exit. Then she paused, her jaw tightening once. "They came for a fight," she said at last, voice low and steady. "Now they have one." Outside the air had shifted, cooler now, heavier, as if even the wind was holding its breath. Amina didn't say another word as they crossed the parking lot. She didn't need to. Her focus didn't waver. Her steps never faltered. Tasha kept pace, unsure whether to speak or just follow. Amina decided for her. "Take me to the shelter." The Animal Control Center sat just off the freeway, a low brick building with barred windows and a flickering security light. The front desk barely looked up when Amina approached, papers in hand, voice calm but firm. There was tension. Protocols were mentioned. Sideways glances exchanged, but her name was on the release form, and that was enough. They brought the dogs out one at a time. Echo came first, careful steps on tile, eyes sharp. The moment he saw her, his ears twitched, his body shifted, and he moved straight to her without a sound. No bark, no whine. He just sat, right at her feet, waiting, watching. Amina crouched, hand out. Let him breathe her in, then rested it on his shoulder. Solid, real. Valor followed, quieter, more subtle, but just as grounded. He pressed lightly against her leg in a silent gesture of connection. They hadn't lost a step, but their bodies carried tension, shoulders set, eyes alert. They didn't know why they'd been separated, only that they hadn't failed. That mattered more than anything. Back at her house, the door shut behind them with a soft click. The dogs paced the room briefly, then settled near the window where her go-bag still sat, untouched. Amina peeled off her outer layers, checking bruises with clinical ease. Her elbow ached, her ribs throbbed, but nothing was broken, nothing she hadn't handled before. In the bathroom, she let the water run over her hands, watched the bruises shift color under the harsh light, then turned off the tap and walked away. This wasn't about recovery. This was about focus. She sat on the edge of her bed and opened an old contact list. No names, just numbers and code words. She didn't need names. You don't forget people who saved your life. 2 calls went unanswered. 1 went to voicemail. The 4th picked up without a word. "I need background," she said. "Ray Brewer. Might be tied to an unregistered group operating under civilian watch. Local club front, flags, uniform patches, you know the type." A pause. Then a quiet voice on the other end asked, "Still looking for fire?" Amina didn't answer right away. Then came the reply, "Only if I have to light it myself." 20 minutes later, she had what she needed. Ray Brewer, 45, former private contractor, discharged after a failed overseas op tied to illegal arms transfers. No convictions, just a trail of lost evidence and dropped charges stretching across 3 states. Had ties to fringe militia groups and unregistered survivalist chapters. Owned a landscaping company. On paper, operated in cash under a dozen fake LLCs. Twice flagged for domestic extremism. Both times, cases closed quietly. One of his properties, listed under an alias, matched a long-abandoned lumber mill just outside town. That was all Amina needed. By early evening, she tracked the younger man from the earlier assault, the one with the limp, to a strip mall on the south side. He picked up a bag in an alley, climbed into a dented white pickup, and drove straight to the mill. He never saw her following. He wouldn't know how to look. She parked 2 blocks away and continued on foot, blending with the trees. Rusted fences, vines wrapping shattered beams, glassless windows open to the wind. No posted guards, but the place wasn't empty. Fresh tire tracks, cigarette butts in an old paint bucket, a slit of light glowing upstairs like someone still believed this was a safe place to hide. Amina watched from the shadows, mapped every angle, every way in and every way out. Inside, there was movement. Boots scraping old wood, metal clattering, voices, laughter, slurred by something chemical. She lowered her voice to a single word. "Stay." The dogs melted into the grass, silent and focused, and Amina stepped into phase 2. By the time she returned home, the moon had climbed high. Silver light cut through the blinds, falling in narrow stripes across the floor. The scent of pine and damp soil clung to her coat, but inside, everything was still. Still, but not calm. The house wasn't resting anymore. It was preparing. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't need to. Her hands moved through drawers and crates with the precision of memory, retrieving what had been untouched since the day she folded her uniform for the last time. Harnesses, custom earpiece, infrared clicker, a pouch of marked decoys, and a tactical baton she hadn't reached for in years. Each piece carried a memory, none powerful enough to slow her down. Echo and Valor watched from the kitchen, silent, still, heads tilted, ears twitching. They knew what this meant. They came to her without command, sat before her, waiting, ready. She strapped on their gear with practiced hands. Buckles clicked into place like clockwork. Outside, the backyard offered just enough cover, 3 sides shielded by trees and hedges, a perfect stand-in for the landscapes they used to work in. She stepped across gravel and mulch like it was muscle memory, avoided brittle leaves, moved like silence had weight. Search. Her voice was low, precise. They moved in formation, not fast, but methodical, not hunting, but recalibrating, remembering. Amina followed their path, setting decoys between fence lines and planters. The metallic clicks, subtle but unmistakable, signaled old instincts. She watched their reaction times, their corrections, their anticipation. Valor moved like tension wrapped in discipline. Every shift in her posture met with mirrored focus. Echo cleared a barrier with ease, circled back and froze beside the last decoy. Perfect posture, perfect control. This wasn't training. This was reconnection. She crouched beside the garden bed, now repurposed as a tactical zone, and let her hand rest on Echo's side. For a moment, just a moment, she drifted, not in thought, in memory, in rhythm. and the silence pulled her back to a place where the ground was dry. The air smelled like dust and gun oil, and survival meant reading seconds like sentences. The convoy had stopped for a routine sweep, the kind that felt normal until it wasn't. The air that day had been thick enough to sting, the scent of scorched metal, sun-baked earth, and something fouler, something old and dead, clung to the breeze. Amina had been second from the lead vehicle, her helmet pressing heavy against her brow, boots grinding into gravel with each careful step. Echo moved beside her, calm but focused. Then he froze, nose just above the dirt, his body locked, not in fear, but in absolute certainty. Amina had felt the shift before her mind caught up. The air, the heat, the silence. Then Echo turned his head and gave a single bark. A second later, everything changed. The IED had been buried just beneath the surface, seconds from detonation. Echo's signal saved 6 lives that day. The scout never saw the wire, but Echo did. Amina remembered shielding him, diving between the blast and her partner, remembered the wave of force like steel and sand crashing over them. He came out limping, streaked with blood, but alive. And the blood wasn't even his. He hadn't hesitated since. She blinked, brushing a thumb across the scar at the base of his neck, the one only she could feel under the fur. Echo didn't look back. He was already focused, watching the perimeter. They trained until the sky darkened and clouds swallowed the moon. Every round sharper than the last. Every signal answered before it finished leaving her hand. By the time they stopped, they weren't 3 separate bodies. They were one rhythm, one unit. Later, Amina stood beneath the porch awning, towel in hand, the dogs at her feet. Their breath still heavy from exertion, their eyes alert. She wasn't tired. She was ready. The mill was waiting, and this time they weren't going in blind. The night smelled of wet earth, pine, and rust. She moved through the tree line without a sound, matching her pace to the terrain. Silent steps on soaked soil, posture low, breath steady. The lumber mill rose ahead like a forgotten relic. Rusted siding shimmered beneath the stripped moonlight, but it didn't look abandoned anymore. It looked claimed. A den, the kind that didn't welcome outsiders. A single yellow light flickered in an upstairs window. Muffled voices drifted through broken insulation. A radio hummed low and distorted, lost in static. Amina crouched by a drainage ditch near the rear fence. She pulled a cutter from her thigh pouch, testing each snip for silence before working through a sagging corner of chain link. She didn't crawl, she flowed. Her body moved like water, compact, composed. Her bag secure, every inch calculated. The dogs remained behind the line, waiting under strict command. They wouldn't be needed inside. Not tonight. This was recon. By the time she reached the utility box on the north side, she was already gloved and slowed to fractions of a second. The panel resisted, rust clinging to its edges, but not enough to stop her. Inside, it was a mess. Twisted copper, rerouted power lines, a job done by someone who thought they were clever. She bypassed the mess, found the main line, sliced the insulation with her hooked blade, and rerouted the current through a delay loop. It would kill the power for 15 seconds, just long enough for confusion, long enough to make any cameras blink. When the lights cut, she moved. Across the gravel, to the loading door, half-rotted, poorly latched. It yielded with a groan, muted by a layer of cloth she'd wrapped around her shoulder. Inside, the scent was unmistakable. Sweat, oil, old lumber, cigarettes, something cooked, something chemical. Amina had breathed air like this before, far worse places than this. She followed the wall, lifted her infrared monocular, and scanned. 3 heat signatures upstairs, 1 pacing, voices bleeding through the rafters. She really thought she'd walk away from this, dogs and all, like she was some kind of hired gun. You see her face when they cuffed her? Unstoppable, That's what they always think. Wonder if the dogs are still alive. Hope not. Animals like that don't belong outside. Laughter followed. Easy, confident. The kind you only hear from people who believe they'll never pay for what they've done. Amina didn't blink. She didn't breathe too loud. She lifted the recorder from her vest. One tap, a soft green glow. Then it disappeared into her jacket. She caught every word, every name, every careless joke. She moved deeper, closer to the stairwell, but still out of view. She didn't need to get near. The building's insulation was old. The acoustics carried. At the far end of the hallway sat a long oak table cluttered with gear, phones, flashlights, half-empty bottles, and weapons left out like trophies. From her pack, she pulled a device no larger than a closed hand. The pin was loosened, but not pulled. She tucked the flashbang beneath a pile of tangled cords, covered it with a crushed soda can, invisible from any angle. It wouldn't harm them. That wasn't the point. It would scatter them, and that was exactly what she needed. She set the timer, 15 seconds, then stepped back, adjusting her footing like she was still inside enemy territory. She moved out exactly the way she came in. Every step mirrored, every surface respected. Past crates labeled with fake brand names, over warped floorboards softened by time and rain, through the fence again and into the hush of the forest. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The flashbang detonated 2 minutes later. It cracked through the woods like a thunderclap. Light burst through the windows of the mill in a sharp white surge. Shouts followed instantly, stumbling, frantic, disoriented. Who left something on the table? I can't see. What was that? I think I twisted my ankle. Their confusion spilled out into the night like static, loud, uncoordinated, full of bluster. Amina crouched just past the tree line, Echo and Valor at her sides, both still, listening, waiting. She hit record, not for leverage, for truth. She slipped into the shadows again, quiet and precise, her exit mapped before the mission had even begun. This wasn't a threat. It was a line in the sand. They wouldn't see her coming next time, but next time, they'd feel it. The path home followed no roads, no streetlights, no welcome signs, only thicket, rock, and silence. Amina moved like someone born for the terrain, unbothered by low branches, unworried by night sounds. The dogs walked in sync at her flanks. No leash needed, no word spoken. They knew. The mission wasn't over. By the time they reached the safe house tucked between two dead ridgelines, the first edge of dawn was cutting across the sky. She fed them by hand, gently, respectfully, checked their paws, their eyes, their breath. Valor had a scrape above his eye. Echo carried a burr in his coat. Small things, familiar things. She treated them like teammates, because that's what they were. When they finally curled up near her boots, she lowered herself beside them, arms loose over her knees, gaze unfocused. Inside, the printer hummed. Page after page spilled out across the wooden floor. Property records, aliases, shell companies, membership forums, a spider web of names that didn't want to be seen, but now couldn't hide. Ray Brewer wasn't just a man. He was a doorway. Behind him, a network of self-styled patriots and former contractors, some broken, some dangerous, most invisible to systems that only looked when forced. They weren't just four guys on a sidewalk. They were infrastructure, and she was dismantling it, thread by thread. Miles away, Officer Derek Ames sat in a dim evidence room, watching dashcam footage loop like a silent confession. Every time he hit play, it stopped 2 minutes short. The part where Amina was arrested, that remained. But the shouting, the threats, the moment when truth slipped out too loud to be buried, gone. Corrupted file, they said. He didn't buy it. He requested the records from Animal Control. Echo and Valor had been labeled aggressive on intake, standard code to justify separation, but one signature on the form didn't match any known employee. A handler, no last name, no record. That was the crack, and cracks led somewhere. By noon, Ames was reading through past complaints filed against Deputy Mays. Most dismissed, but one name showed up twice, Ray Brewer. No charges, no statements, just warnings. Ames didn't speak. He printed everything, put it in a manila folder, then left early. No explanation. Truth was, he needed distance. Time to follow what wasn't on the books. Back in the cabin, Amina rolled out a detailed map across the floor. Red ink marked known safe houses, vehicles, routes. Brewer's people ran like a machine. Morning drives, noon supply runs, late-night meetings in the same rusted pickups. They rotated like clockwork because they assumed no one was watching. But someone was, and not just watching, tracking. His cousin ran dispatch in the next county. Another operated a veterans group with no actual veterans on record. Each one shielded the next, but every shield has a seam. And now she had rhythm. She had audio. She had faces. She had intent. And most importantly, she had time. Because this fight, it wasn't over. It was just getting precise. Want the next chapter? Make sure you're subscribed, because when justice moves in silence, it hits the hardest. She didn't hesitate. The next move wouldn't be a warning. It wouldn't be for show. It would be exposure. Every fake name, every phony business, every whispered threat made behind locked doors, all of it was going to be pulled into daylight. But to hit the system from the inside, she needed one last thing: access. And that meant she needed Ames. The hallway outside the precinct break room held that old kind of tension, the kind only government buildings collect over time, the hum of old fluorescents, the stale air, the quiet reminders of things never written down. Officer Ames stood beneath a faded bulletin board, staring past bake sale flyers and retirement notices that no longer meant anything. Then Deputy Mays appeared, uniform crisp, smirk ready. The moment froze. "You've been poking around," Mays said, skipping the small talk. His tone was easy, the kind used by men who never expected consequences to knock on their door. Ames didn't flinch, didn't blink. "You lied in your report." Mays smiled, twitching slightly. "You got a badge and a keyboard. I got eyes on the ground. What I wrote is what I saw." "No," Ames said. "It's what you wanted to see." Mays stepped closer, his voice dipping low, but never uncertain. "You don't want to get in the middle of this. Trust me. It's bigger than a dog bite and a broken nose." "I know," Ames replied. "That's the problem." He didn't stay for more. He turned and walked out, leaving Mays frozen in place, watching him go with clenched teeth and a silent warning. That night, the burner phone buzzed once on Ames's kitchen counter. No caller ID, no name, just a message. "Encrypted file. Verify before opening." He scanned it twice, then decrypted it using a coded string Amina had buried deep in the metadata. The folder opened like a confession. Satellite photos, police reports, internal rosters from Brewer's so-called outreach group, red flagged names with federal watch lists attached, a scanned weapons log, serials half scratched out, a stained patch with a familiar flag, and a quote circled in red ink: "Cleansing the roots so the country can grow right again." Ames sat in silence, piecing it together. The lumber mill wasn't just a hideout. It was a hub, a funnel for meetings, storage, orders. Amina's arrest wasn't an accident. It was theater, a power play, a test, to see who would notice, to see who would blink. Then came the voicemail, from Tasha. Her voice was tired but clear. "Hey, it's me. You remember that woman with the dogs? Yeah, they actually booked her. cuffed her like she was the threat. I told you she wasn't the problem. Brewer. He laughed about it, said it was fun, said getting the dog handler booked was the best part. His words. I recorded the call. You want it? He wanted it. Within the hour, the audio was in the hands of Internal Affairs. Ames didn't sign it. He sent it anonymously. But he knew it would land, loud enough to force questions, clear enough to pull attention. That same night, on the edge of the mill's back lot, a faint thud echoed through the trees, followed by the hiss of smoke. A distraction charge went off. White plume, sharp pop. 2 men sprinted outside, yelling, coughing, waving blindly at the air. They didn't see the shadow that slipped in through the rear dock door. They never would. Amina moved with silence sharpened by memory. Every beam, every corner already mapped in her head. The upstairs office waited behind a crooked steel door. She picked the lock in seconds, slid inside. 3 locked ammo boxes, 2 crates, 1 reinforced drawer. It took her 20 seconds to open. Inside, ledger books, 3 of them. 1 tracked fuel and gear. The second listed codes and guard rotations. But the third was darker. Partial payments, weapons listed in symbols, shorthand notes, sketches of hate insignias. 1 line that read, payment received, dog handler neutralized. She didn't pause. She didn't react. She photographed every page, cloned the desktop hard drive, then placed a GPS tracker in the spine of the binder marked donors. Let them run, let them scatter. She'd know where to find every single one. Next time they open that book, it won't just be for record keeping. It'll be the start of their undoing. As the smoke began to lift in the mill yard and the voices outside sharpened into blame, Amina was already gone. She slipped back into the woods, silent, unseen, with the weight of proof strapped to her shoulders and one hand resting gently on Valor's back. She didn't need to rush. She had what they thought would stay buried. The old courthouse basement was never truly quiet. It buzzed with the electric hum of tired fluorescents and the low shuffle of forgotten stories trapped in filing cabinets and dust-coated microfilm. Officer Ames sat alone, surrounded by the scent of aged paper and stale air. The file in his lap bore the name Raymond Brewer, Jr., stamped across the top in faded red, sealed by order of Judge S. Langston. But sealed didn't mean invisible. Not anymore. Once Ames traced the family line, the story cracked open. Ray Brewer, current leader of a group dressed up as rural patriots, was the son of Harold Brewer, former sheriff of Cedar Hills County, respected, decorated, protected. Buried deep in the archives was a name, Julio Ramirez, 16, last seen 12 years ago, arguing with Ray Brewer in front of a gas station, a missing persons report filed by his cousin, filed and forgotten. No real investigation. Just another teen incident shuffled behind juvenile disturbances. The pattern was clear. Power had kept certain truths locked away, but now they were breaking loose. That same day, Tasha Monroe called again. Her voice was strained, but steady. "There's more," she said. "Old blogs, local message boards, stuff people delete when they think no one's watching. I found a post from Julio's aunt. She said she heard Brewer brag about it back then. No one believed her, but it's still archived. I sent it." Ames didn't ask how she found it. He just opened the link, read it, twice, then traced the IP. It was real. And what Amina had already sensed now had shape. This wasn't about one man. It wasn't even about one gang. It was a system, cultivated, protected, recycled through generations. That night, in the shadow of a rusted junkyard, Amina stood face to face with one of the crew's errand boys, split lip, sweat-soaked, pinned between a broken-down truck and 2 unmoving shepherds who didn't bark, only watched. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words cut cleaner in silence. "You know what this place used to be?" she asked. "Military salvage, parts pulled from downed convoys. There's a rhythm to wreckage. Every piece tells a story. So will you." He cracked faster than she expected. They always do when they realize no one's coming to help. "They've got a list," he said. "Names. People they push. Some kids. One was maybe 10, 11. They said he stole bikes. Rye beat him. Said he got what he deserved. I didn't touch him, I swear. I just drove." Amina's voice was low. "What happened to him?" "They said he moved away. They said he did. Undocumented. Nobody would care." She gave one nod. "Where's the list?" "Mill office, ledger drawer, under the floor panel. Green tape." "And Ramirez?" The boy flinched. "Before my time? But they talk. They say Brewer made an example of him." She gave a silent signal. Valor stepped back. Echo circled once, then returned to her side. She left him there, alone in the rust, not out of mercy, out of strategy. By the time she returned to the cabin, the plan was already locked. The list, the ledger, the last piece. She wasn't alone anymore. Tasha had found her voice. Ames had followed the thread. Even the man in the junkyard had cracked under the weight of truth. And when institutions refuse to name their rot, it falls to those outside to tear the roots out by hand. The server room sat hidden beneath the county records office. 2 floors down, a keypad nobody had updated since the last renovation. It buzzed softly, cold and sterile, lit by the whine of caged servers stacked in racks. To most people, it looked like nothing. To Amina, it was the epicenter. She moved like she belonged, all black, no reflection, no noise. Her pack tight, essentials only. The copied access card clicked into the panel. The lock disengaged with a soft hiss. The central cabinet opened. Her fingers moved across the keys with rhythm, not speed. She navigated subfolders, masked directories, shadow files buried under decoys, and found exactly what they thought no one ever would. Donor logs, private communications, altered police reports, a digital replica of the physical network she'd already mapped in red ink. And then she did one more thing. She uploaded it, twice. One to a secure server in another city, the other to a federal field office address. No subject line, no message, just a single file marked Witness 1, timestamp confirmed. Then she logged off, pulled the drive, and walked out into the night. Because when justice won't come through the front door, some women build a new door. She scrubbed her trace, bypassed 2 system flags, and launched the upload. What she carried wasn't just data. It was a mirror, held up to power. Documents, videos, scanned records, audio files, proof of every coded threat, every shadow payment, every name they whispered in back rooms and masked with flags. It all went into the cloud. Every alias, every fake LLC, every face that thought it was safe, and at the end of it, one file for the public. Operation White Veil, internal network exposure, a scheduled release, 36 hours. If she vanished, it would all go live, everywhere, no filter, no spin. She shut the server cabinet, locked the door, and slipped into the street like a ripple in the dark. The city exhaled around her, cool air, streetlights blinking overhead. The sky stretched tight with something coming. And still, she didn't stop. That night, she surveyed the final location, a rundown hunting cabin buried deep beyond the county line. No signage, no cell service, no digital footprint, but it was there, sitting crooked on the hillside like a rotting tooth. She mapped every weakness, the loose paneling on the north wall, the cracked propane tank near the shed, the insulation boards nailed up in drunken geometry to try and mute sound. They thought she'd disappeared, thought the system had swallowed her like so many others before. They thought wrong. Back at the station, Officer Ames sat across from Internal Affairs, his badge already sealed in a plain envelope. "You've been in contact with a known fugitive," the investigator said. "You leaked internal documents." "No," Ames answered. "I leaked the truth." "You're done here, officer." He stood, didn't argue, didn't apologize. He walked out, head high, phone buzzing once in his pocket. Amina, final message, final stage, 0200, broadcast, if I go dark. But Ames had already acted, already uploaded the footage, already handed it off. One clip, Deputy Mays texting Ray Brewer seconds after Amina's arrest. Another, Mays leaning into an interrogation room, whispering, "She's not walking out of here, I'll make sure of that." Clear as daylight. The package went to a journalist Ames trusted, a veteran with his own scars, now running a podcast known for taking on systems no one else would touch. The reply came quick. "If you disappear, everyone hears everything." In the back room of her cabin, Amina knelt beside Valor and Echo, checked harnesses, tested each strap, pressed her forehead lightly to theirs. Not affection, alignment. This wasn't revenge. This was removal, one piece at a time. The cabin loomed ahead like a wound on the hillside, walls dark, a single yellow bulb flickering above the door, bottles, tools, decay. She stopped at the tree line, hand resting on Echo's back. Valor already easing forward, low, patient, silent. The scent of old beer and oil clung to the air. But there was something else. Complacency. She scanned fast, truck by the shed, generator pulsing weakly behind it. Extension cords like veins. They weren't ready. They thought fear meant silence. They thought she was done. They were about to learn the difference. 2 taps on her thigh. Echo melted into the dark, cutting wide behind the cabin. Valor slipped toward the side door, beneath broken gutters, and Amina followed, not like a ghost, like gravity. She crouched by the porch, still as stone. Inside, a bottle tipped, rolling. Laughter. Then, "Oh," she screamed like a stuck pig. "You should have seen her run." Another voice. Closer, drunker, thicker. "Still think she'll show up again?" A pause. Then the third voice, darker. "If she does, we bury her right this time." Amina didn't blink, her breath steady, her boots planted, her eyes fixed on the door, and for a moment, just a moment, the whole world held its breath with her. They thought they were untouchable. Tonight, they'll learn what it feels like to be seen. The door. Amina paused. She counted her breath, counted her options, then pressed the switch. A soft hum came to life in her hand, the stun baton sparking with sharp, quiet promise. From the far side of the cabin, Echo gave one short bark. Contact. The side door creaked open. A man stepped outside, cigarette in one hand, pistol at his hip, swagger in his walk because he didn't know he was already a name on a list. Valor struck first. From the shadows like a bolt, slamming into his legs and folding him to the ground. The cigarette flew from his lips. The scream was barely audible before Echo closed the gap, silent and focused. Amina moved in sync, baton to ribs, current arcing into muscle. The man buckled, spasmed, dropped, conscious, but no longer a threat. Inside, someone shouted, but she was already in motion. She rolled through the open door, landing behind a cracked recliner. A thick man in a hunting vest surged at her, knife raised. She didn't flinch. Her boot struck his knee. Crack. He stumbled. His blade came down wild and wide. She caught his wrist, twisted, slammed it into the wall. Bone. Breaking. The knife fell. She pivoted, locked his arm, and flung him backward, through the coffee table. It shattered beneath him. He reached for something. Belt. Maybe a weapon. But Echo was already there, jaw clamped on his forearm with surgical force. The man froze, breath broken, eyes wide. Amina didn't need to say a word. The dog waited, still, listening. From the hallway, more chaos. Another figure charged, younger, desperate, baseball bat in hand. Amina let him swing once, then parried the second with her forearm. Redirect, disarm, drop. She drove her knee into his gut, flipped him, and Valor stepped in with a growl so low it vibrated the floorboards. But one sound from Amina, a soft-tongued click. Hold. They held. More footsteps from the back, heavy, fast. She dragged the stunned attacker by the collar and shoved him into a closet, blocked it with a chair. Echo slid to her flank. Valor held the threshold. Then she moved forward, not retreating, advancing. The air inside the cabin was heavy now, not with smoke, with reckoning. The floor groaned beneath her boots like it remembered pain, remembered what violence sounded like. And tonight, it remembered her. Behind her, Echo's steps were measured, tight to her side. Valor ahead, tracking sound, breath, stillness. Then, a crash. Back room, furniture shoved, a curse, a slamming door. He knew she was here, but he didn't know he was out of time. She raised one hand, palm open. Valor crouched low. Echo vanished into the shadows. The hallway narrowed. A doorway ahead, crooked wood, warped frame. Then, movement. A flicker of denim, a holster, held breath. The door exploded open. A man with a hammer, screaming something slurred and pointless. Amina stepped into him. Baton swept clean, hit his wrist. His grip shattered. She caught the hammer, flipped it, and drove the back end into his ribs. He barked out a breath. Echo surged in, took him off his feet, through a bookshelf. Wood cracked, paper flew, the hallway screamed with noise. Then two more, one with a tire iron, one with a hunting blade. They moved together, fast, heavy, arrogant. They didn't see the signal. Her left hand, low flick. Valor moved, teeth, impact. The man with the tire iron hit the wall hard enough to dent it. He tried to scream, choked on it. Amina met the knife midair, caught his elbow, twist, drop, slam, knee to the gut. Twice, he collapsed. The hallway was wreckage now, groans, debris, blood. But she didn't slow. They weren't the target. She stepped through, past what they thought was protection, eyes locked ahead. One door left, closed. Behind it, Brewer, the one who started it, the one who thought it would stay buried, the one who believed systems would keep him safe. Amina stepped forward. Echo growled, deep, measured. Valor coiled beside her, silent and ready. She reached for the knob and twisted, because when they closed every door on justice, she didn't knock. She broke it open. The cabin fell silent. Brewer lay face down in the mud, his breath shallow, his pride shattered, his illusions bleeding out through every broken gasp. Amina didn't move right away. She stayed crouched, her knee between his shoulders, not out of rage, but to make sure, to mark the end. The rain kept falling, steady, cold, cleansing, washing the blood and dirt from her hands, but not from the truth. She finally stood. No gloating, no words, no revenge, only finality. Echo returned to her side, body tense but obedient. Valor followed, eyes still fixed on Brewer, as if daring him to twitch. Amina looked down one last time. "You called this a game," she said, her voice low enough to get lost in the wind. "But I don't play." Then she turned and walked away. Not into hiding, not into exile, into daylight. Because in her hands now, smudged but real, was everything. The evidence, the confession, the names. Justice wasn't something she was asking for anymore. It was something she'd already taken. Not because the world had changed completely, but because she had helped it start. She didn't scan the yards anymore, didn't flinch at the sound of tires. She just walked. Valor trotted ahead, Echo close behind, and the air around them, it was still. Not because danger had disappeared, but because silence no longer meant surrender, because truth had taken root, because justice had been witnessed. And this time, the town saw everything. Let me know if you'd like this entire story formatted into a professional script for narration, divided into YouTube voiceover segments, or adapted into a trailer-style cut with music cues and pacing markers. It's powerful, and it deserves to reach as many people as possible.